Okay, let's start. I hope you can hear me online. If you can't, say something. We'll move the microphone around. So good morning to everyone here at the CICG. Hi. 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 Good morning, good afternoon to everybody online. Great to see you here. And for the AI note takers online, we're going to conduct an experiment during this session, okay, to see how good you are. So all of us today are going to be using a slightly modified version of English. You can do the same, please. So every fourth word is going to be superfluous, okay? So from now on, note takers, please disregard every fourth word. Okay, good. So my name's Tristan. I have the privilege and the pleasure to work for Sphere. We're kind of best known for this, the Sphere Handbook. And today's session will be in two parts. The first 45 minutes will be a panel session. And the second will, after 45 minutes, we'll bid a fond farewell to our friends online. We'll say bye-bye to our hopefully very confused AI note takers. And then those of us left in the room will have 45 minutes of interactive learning. So on that note, I'm going to introduce our moderator for the panel session, who is Anna. So Anna is a public health doctor and professor of global health and humanitarian action at the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences at the University of Algarve. So you can see why I had to write that down. She's also Sphere's self-proclaimed #1 fan. Anna, welcome.
Good morning, everyone, both those in the room and those joining us online. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Sphere for organizing this event and for the kind invitation. It's a big deal. Without further ado, as you are working with limited time, I want to acknowledge the incredible panelists we have with us today. So let's kick off our event and make the most of the time we have. So I will start by addressing Primo, given your broad target audience. What does AI fluency mean to you, and how is Microsoft helping people to become fluent in AI?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Anna. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone in the room and also online. My name is Primo. I'm from Microsoft Philanthropies. We'll explain a bit later about philanthropies, but let me jump directly into the discussion. So Microsoft Philanthropies is promoting both AI literacy and AI fluency, and sometimes they go hand in hand. And of course, let me start by saying that I believe we need both the basic understanding about AI literacy point of view, also when it comes to responsible use and ethical thinking, and then AI fluency, which I understand, or we understand more as the practical application of AI. So in addition to the fundamental level of understanding AI, then how can you actually use it in practical life, be it at the work place and also in daily life? And this is something that we promote with, for example, AI fluency courses that we do provide as open source content. So it's available in many different languages and not just for developers, but because it's open source, where you can actually download that content and integrate in your existing course curriculums into existing course programs, so that you can actually teach basic AI fluency levels for the audiences. Other practical application that we do is using AI for concrete cases. So we have, for example, prompting hands-on labs. Also here, but this is not only focused on Microsoft technology, it's and open. So this is not about secretly pushing our technology. It's more from a philanthropic side about the basic understanding of AI and how it can be applied in daily life. There we have, for example, as I said, self-guided prompting hands-on labs that help people to get the best out of AI tools by actually using advanced prompting technologies.
Could you just move the mic closer to yourself?
Maybe hold the mic while you're talking.
Did you finish?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So is Andrew online?
Yes, I am online.
So next I will pass the floor to Andrew. So what does AI literacy mean to you, and what has Sphere done so far in this space?
Thanks for that question. My name is Andrew Nzimbi, and I am an independent consultant in monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, currently based in Nairobi. And I am also a Sphere trainer. So just to take up your question, what AI literacy means for me is that AI literacy is the ability to identify, to critically assess, contextualize, utilize, and also monitor artificial intelligence technologies and the related products thereof. So what is AI and what are some of the products that can come out of using the AI in context-specific locations? Then in terms of what Sphere has done so far in this space, so maybe the premise I'd give is that the principle of do no harm or minimizing harm is central to Sphere's philosophy. So when a new thing comes along with the potential to cause harm to people affected by crisis, then Sphere has a moral obligation to react to it. So regarding artificial intelligence, Sphere has worked with data-friendly space, for example. It has also worked with Nesta and CDAC, communicating with disaster-affected communities, on a project regarding AI safety, which is about making good choices around artificial intelligence. And in this case, focusing on conducting technical assessments, for example, on potential AI platforms, about conducting organizational capacity assessments for AI, or even checking social acceptability and risk assessments of AI prior to using it in the field level. And also further to that, as part of this project, Sphere led a survey of network constituents, that is humanitarians that are working closely with Sphere, asking what people would like to learn in terms of AI. And the training was the top result. Most of the people said that they'd want training around AI. And so Sphere organized a workshop for humanitarians in Nairobi in February this year, just to discover what it means to be AI literate in the humanitarian sector.
Thank you, thank you. So now let's move on to Bernadette. So it's the same question that I asked Andrew, but how is RedR helping people in the sector to become AI literate?
I'll bring this microphone closer to me. Thank you, Anna. My name is Bernadette Sexton. I'm the Chief Executive at RedR, and we're a learning and development organization that provides support right across the humanitarian sector. I think high level, when we think about AI, many of us find it quite amorphous. It is quite big and abstract. And for me, AI literacy really means having the ability to be able to critically engage and reflect using the knowledge, mindsets, and skills that allows us to be able to engage specifically within the humanitarian sector. And as Andrew was talking about, where it's grounded and rooted in humanitarian principles. That's critical for us. From my perspective, that means that we need frameworks to be able to consider, and there are competencies to be able to enable that level of literacy. Very broadly speaking, I would put those competencies into three main buckets. The first is in relation to digital planning and design. The second is in relation to data use and governance. And third is around digital management and execution. And if I unpack those a little bit in the short time that we have, on the planning and design, that's really having an understanding within the roles that we have in the organizations within which we work within the sector, the complexity of today's problems, trying to anticipate unexpected events and to be able to recognize the strategic opportunities that can come with that and to be able to enact those. The data use and governance pillar, as I see it, is really looking at how we can understand the role and the value of data to be able to use, analyze, and share data, but really taking into consideration privacy, ethical, and commercial considerations. And that needs to be done, obviously, on a country-by-country level. And this is fundamental if we want to consider the governance challenges that we've been discussing during the week. And if I consider the panels I've been attending the last few days, I've observed the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, I've engaged with people who feel that AI is the be-all solution to all of our problems. And on the other end of the spectrum, I'm observing people who are saying, this is too much of a risk, we shouldn't be touching it at all. And from my perspective, the literacy is if we have a competency framework where we can consider how to engage and if it's right to engage for our particular organizations. Because then the third competency is more around the management and execution, which is really looking at fostering new ways of working, but also for the sector, the modalities of engagement with the communities which we're working with. At its worst, we continue to perpetuate power dynamics that are already in existence with new technology. And an even greater risk is that a lot of these technologies are owned by one or few individuals, and we need to be very careful around that. The second part of your question was in relation to how are RedR helping people to become AI literate. As I mentioned at the outset, we are a learning and development organization. For those of you who have worked with us, particularly people with Sphere, we like to be able to provide trainings that are relevant for the community. We have been engaging in data literacy significantly over the past couple of years, and we having increasingly people coming to us asking questions about AI and how it applies within the humanitarian sector. Or trainings that we offer are at the individual and at the organizational level, and then at a sector level, considering the standards that we need to consider. And I know Tristan within Sphere is doing a lot of thinking around AI safety for the sector as well. So for anyone who'd like to have a discussion later, we're very happy to do that as well. When we get on to the workshop, we are planning to make that available to everyone. And we are developing an AI for humanitarian training as well, which will be a one-day training. It's basically looking at the fundamentals of AI within the sector.
Well, James, over to you.
Good morning, everyone in the room. I think just put a thumbs up if people can hear me clearly. That'd be great just to know. Perfect. Thank you so much. No, thank you so much for inviting me here today. My name is James. I'm Head of Digital Learning at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and we produce online training, and we also partner with other organisations to host online training for a wide variety of humanitarian and development specialist subjects. And one of our big areas is also digital leadership, and some of the panel have already mentioned some courses that we've partnered on previously. We've been curating some of Microsoft's fantastic free resources and some of the other resources. So really, really great to be here to talk about this. For us, we've started to use the term AI readiness rather than AI literacy for the way we describe the whole of our programs in this area. And that's just a bit of an acknowledgement of the fact that in many, many ways, we're really on the cusp of the impact from AI really coming to effect, and really there being an AI transformation. We're all learning together, including the humanitarian sector, the technology companies, and the people we're trying to serve, but we're not quite there yet. And that's why I think readiness is the way we tend to describe it. And it's about how organizations, how leaders, how staff can prepare themselves in the most effective way so that when that transformation does start to really take hold, we're all in a really, really, really good space to make the most value from that, and also to make sure that the least harm happens because of data ethics or any other issues involving AI. The way we sort of like break that down is so similar to the last panelist, the way that she described it. It's very much starting with problem solving, really trying to work out what is the human-centered problem you're trying to solve before you jump in and try and find the technology that solves that. It's so important, that planning aspect of it. Data structures, data literacy, data processes is also incredibly important, because so much of AI value comes from having good data to draw from. So organizations and staff really being understanding what data-driven planning and data-driven implementation means is so important to AI readiness. And then finally, it's that actual transformation stage where you're actually trying to implement some specific solutions. AI is not going to be a solution to everything. It's going to be a solution to some very specific things. So being really, really clear about what you're trying to transform, what are the management structures and governance place to do that. That's kind of the final section. So I look forward to talk a little bit more about that and to hear a little bit more from the panel and the room for the rest of the session. And thank you very much.
Thanks you, James. So we will now open the floor for questions from our participants, both online and in person. Does anyone have a question? Someone online, in person? They are shy. Oh, Can you present this question?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Founder from Plan International. So thank you for the panel as well as in person and on Zoom. So yeah, of course, risk become something that we need to consider about this, especially when now when we are talking AI with for humanitarian, there are more and more also interest from young people to become a young professional as young humanitarian. So I'm just wondering, we know that there is a risk, right, in terms of data privacy and etc. So what we need to do more, or what else that we need to kind of like be mindful when we are going to this direction, because yeah, AI is the future, but of course we also need to mitigate the risk. So just wondering some insight from the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, let me start. Thanks a lot for the answer. So, for the question. So, potentially even already hint towards the answer. So, let me start from Microsoft side, and I believe there's other voices afterwards as well. So, we believe that from Microsoft side, we have a very strong obligation to inform people about not only the basics of AI, how it works and how you can use it, but especially also to make them aware about responsible use of AI, to make them aware about basic principles when it comes to, as Bernadette mentioned before, privacy, data privacy, ethical thinking, security. So those are extremely important aspects that we do also incorporate into our trainings, because we believe it's extremely important that people are aware what AI means, what it can do, all the benefits, but are also aware, and you mentioned it, about some potential risks, how to actually avoid that or address it, and especially also with the critical thinking, because as we all have seen that AI can produce this and that results, and it needs the human brain, and it needs critical thinking to make sure that AI is not like ruling, but it's actually just a tool. And that's why, for example, we also named one of our technology the co-pilot. It's not the pilot. The human shall be the pilot and stay in the driver's seat, while the tool can actually help to, for example, gain some efficiency, save some time, to even come up with some ideas for innovation. But again, the human shall be in the driver's seat. And this is a very important principle, and that we also try to bring across with our training. So when we talk about AI literacy and fluency trainings, we always incorporate the responsible use of AI, and also we try to foster critical thinking. So some of these competences like critical thinking will become even way more important in the future. And that's something that we also try to actually support with our trainings.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would, please. And I think that's a really good question. From my perspective, depending on our roles within organizations, or if depending on what we do on a day-to-day basis, I consider it on 3 different levels: as individual users, as leaders, and as implementers. And our responsibilities differ, or our frameworks differ depending on where we sit there. And we need to consider that right across our stakeholders. So from the perspective of any leader in the room or online at the moment, what does that mean for our strategy, obviously, but then also the goals and the resourcing that we need to be able to have attached to that. For those then who are implementers, and I'm not referring to the technical specialists that you have at the likes of Microsoft, I'm talking about the people within our organizations who are responsible for the policies and the associated rollout, what they need to be able to have to be able to apply that within their respective organizations, aligned with the values. And there's not going to be one blanket approach. It's going to depend on the mandate of our own particular organizations. And then lastly, as we engage as users on a daily basis, how are we considering it? And Primo, I like the way you frame it, that it is a tool and that it is a co-pilot rather than it dictating. And it was interesting when I got the questions before coming here, and for the fun of it, I put the questions into a couple of different engines, and I wasn't impressed with the answers at all. So, and usually they do give me a kind of a basis from which to work with, but just having that critical mindset that we're bringing even as users in our day-to-day. I think when we get into the workshop, there's some interesting applications already that we're observing on, geospatial mapping, on even things like translations, which is saving our own, it's saving time, it's having a major application, but in how we use these tools in a way that is ethical and grounded in these humanitarian principles that we keep on talking about is what we need to be able to consider.
Thank you. So I think that we have someone online. Andrew, are you there?
Yes. So maybe just respond to the question about what we should do to be more mindful going the AI direction. What I'd say from my end is start off with what is a problem that we are trying to address using AI. And I'm very glad that James mentioned about sort of using people-centered approaches. And so from my end, I think that what we need to do is first identify the problem that we want AI to help us in addressing. Then secondly, go back to the people that it is that we want to address this problem with. So sort of getting in mind what is the context where it is that we're going to work in, what are the utility risks that are going to be involved when it comes to using that particular AI. And then finally, it's the whole issue around collaboration. And here, what I mean is trying not to create an AI crisis whereby we are reinventing the wheel. So if there's more collaboration, especially within the humanitarian sector, I think that would be much more better in terms of avoiding an AI crisis whereby everybody's just coming up with different AI platforms. I'd see it more beneficial if we are more synergistic and applying a more collaborative approach. Over.
Thank you, Andrew. So I think we have a question from Caroline online.
Yes, thank you so much. So my question is from a funder's perspective. I'm calling in from UPS Foundation, and of course we fund a lot of nonprofit partners and who are working in the humanitarian space, and we are curious to see how the programs that we support can be benefited through the use of AI. So I don't know whether you have any information from a funder's perspective, how this can be beneficial. I know from a logistics perspective, it's helpful with things like prepositioning of supplies, but any other things you've encountered that could be useful for funders, or whether that's private sector, corporate foundations, or other nonprofit partners as well.
Thank you, Carol. James, do you want to respond, or Andrew?
Yes, I'll give it a go. I think the question is asking specifically from the funder's perspective, what would be beneficial rather than necessarily what would be beneficial to the things that be funded. But if that's not the case, Caroline, please do clarify. I would say right now, I think one of the biggest problems we have as someone who's funded by big organizations and having to report back is actually trying to evaluate the impact of a lot of the work we do. Requires processing a lot of data. It requires going through a lot of evaluation forms, feedback summaries, both qualitative and quantitative. And AI is already being used during that process in order to summarize that information. And then we'll go to funders in order for them to better understand the impact that projects are happening. So that would be one specific example that from our experience as well. And I suspect from a funding, I think funders' point of view, it might be very interesting to use those AI tools to look across funding portfolios to see what sort of things come out of there. Because there's a huge amount of information for funders to process.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that, and it's leading on from the one of the private sector events that I attended earlier in the week. I think all of HNPW has been couched in the fact that we're working in a very different funding environment. For funders who are interested in AI applications, I think giving the opportunity to many of the organizations in this room to be able to test and to experiment and to be able to apply some level of curiosity, that is something that would be very beneficial to many organizations. I think there's probably a second opportunity where you're engaging specifically with organizations that align with the work that you do within the foundation, and finding that where there is a value add, that takes time to be able to cultivate and nurture. I'm talking about from an organizational perspective where we work a lot within the engineering sector as well as the insurance sector where we have partners, and it takes a lot of time to be able to develop those. So anything that UPS can do with partners that align with your values would be really beneficial, recognizing the constraints that we face. I think there's a benefit there.
We have questions? Yeah, okay. That colleague is first, right? Can you present and
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. Francesca Grandi from Transparency International Defense and Security. I'm the head of advocacy and strategy. So the question comes from this mind frame. What are your views on how we can insert incentives within the system and within this general trend of relying more and more, which I think is very good, on public-private partnerships? Which incentives can we make sure that we insert in the system so that private partners are drawn toward creating more safeguards, more in accordance to the needs of humanitarian organizations, sensitive data, protection of our beneficiaries, etc. Thank you very much.
Bernadette, do you want to answer?
It's private for me to answer. I think that's my view.
I actually wonder, Tristan, given the work you've been doing on AI safety, if this is something that you'd like to come in on.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Probably can't see me online. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, just I put a link in the chat already. So there was some work which Nesta and Sphere did, funded by the SCDO. And we looked at the idea of a safety label. So somebody that works in procurement in a humanitarian organization it would be a bit like a fair trade label or a Nutri-Score on some food, something of that nature. And so we did a scoping exercise on that and spoke to really all the stakeholders, many stakeholders, including donors and people in procurement and many others. Basically, everyone thought it would be a great idea and they'd like to see it, right? But there is the obvious question is who was going to pay for it? And I think there was an impression among the donors, some big institutional donors that we spoke to, that if everyone moved at the same time and they all agreed on one label, then this could work. And so that's about where we've got to at the moment. Obviously, making that happen is going to be quite difficult. But as Andrew mentioned, we did a survey of part of that process, and we asked people what they thought about AI governance. And what we discovered is that most humanitarians are not ready to engage in AI governance because they don't have the basic literacy training in AI. And that's really what's brought us to where we are today about focusing on AI literacy training for humanitarians.
Thanks, Tristan. The only thing I'd add to that is that as a sector, we're not acting in isolation and we should look at what's being done elsewhere. So from my perspective, when I look at other competency frameworks, UNESCO have a really interesting one around AI and how it links to the competencies that are required for civil servants. The Alan Turing Institute has also developed a really interesting AI competency framework, and even the public health in England, they have done some work for healthcare professionals. So it's important as we evolve in the sector, in addition to getting the basic competencies and literacy that Primo was talking about, as we want to also in part advance to different levels of fluency, but look at what's happening elsewhere, because that will support us.
And another question in the room, and then I just want people online, okay?
Thank you. Question to RedR. You said that you are offering one training. Can you be clear about it, the content of that things and who are the audience? The other question is that the critical problem we face about the need assessment and also the monitoring. Do you have any experience using the AI in this field? Any experience? Thank you.
So for our panelists in the room. I'm monopolizing.
I do feel like I am monopolizing. In terms of the one-day training, where is Victoria? Okay, so Victoria is the person who has been developing it. Victoria is our learning and development maestro and our lead. In terms of the course description, we're developing a one-day workshop, and it is to allow a basic level of AI literacy to better understand, use, monitor, and critically reflect on how we can use AI within the humanitarian sector that is clearly grounded within humanitarian principles and analysis. So it's not going to be about like, how to use the tips and tricks to improve CV, to use ChatGPT. That's not the objective of the course at all. And it's also targeting that entry level. Now, if people are also interested in more advanced engagement and how we do tailor trainings as well. So I would say, come talk to Victoria, come talk to myself afterwards. And what was the second part of your question?
The two critical area. One is need assessment and the other is monitoring of the humanitarian response. How AI can help. Any experience in the last few years using these things?
Yeah, we were actually doing a piece of work with USAID on data literacy, and it looked at the cycle end to end of where looking at data, the historical point about garbage in, garbage out, so being able to recognize what we're getting out is as good as what is going in, but also critically, what question are we asking? What answers do we want to be able to get? And I think as a starting point, having a sense as a team or as an organization of what that is going to be more important even, but it's still important regardless, as we engage more with AI, so that we have a real sense of how best to use and analyze that data, and from that then to be able to make inferences that apply to our organizations.
James, you want to add something?
Yes, on the needs assessment, that is one of the big areas that we've identified as AI having some value, and particularly but the learning needs assessment from our perspective. But what we have found is that prior to using the AI, you do need to have your data ready in terms of the classic needs assessment kind of information that we get from our humanitarian response teams, and the data available in terms of what learning courses might be available. And once you have those two data sets, AI is really, really good at picking out what learning would match the need. And that's just a very, very specific example, but it's really, really important to get that data structured to begin with before then you bring it into AI to ask it a question of, can you please match what learning resources would meet this particular need in this context? So that's just a specific example. Happy to talk a little bit more about it if that'd be interesting to anyone.
Thank you. So I think you have a question from Zunaira online. Well, I have a question. So how do Microsoft philanthropies help non-profits benefit from hiring?
Sure, thank you, Anna. So let me start by stating that, as mentioned, I'm from Microsoft Philanthropies, which is quite important from a point of view that this is not like anyhow related to sales. So we, of course, have a local subsidiary like Microsoft Switzerland, and they're very clearly focusing on marketing and sales. That is totally different from Microsoft Philanthropy. So I think it's very important because we don't have any sales target whatsoever. We do not promote Microsoft technology per se. Yes, I do admit that in some of the trainings, it comes along with it. And if someone wants to have, for example, Copilot, we can provide it, but it's not something that we're leading with. It's more about the principles of data and AI. And I like James' point very much, because we also very often refer to it as data and AI, because you need to have the proper database. And so it's really about AI per se and not our technology. The thing, the basic thinking there is that we are fundamentally convinced that AI is so-called base technology, and that will have very broad societal impact compared to internet or even electricity. And if we look at some of the places where this is not always given, we believe we have our obligation, as we are pushing AI, as we're leading to a certain degree, we have our obligation to also take people along, to make sure that people are enabled, that everyone gets a fair chance to also have a basic AI understanding, and based on their own judgment, to make them being in a position to judge it, and based on their own judgment, how they could potentially want to use AI or not. So that's what we believe from Microsoft Philanthropies is very important, that people are enabled, that they have a base understanding, that they see the change that's coming and what it could mean for them. And that's why we're working with partners. We're working with partners in the non-profit, in the NGO area, where we provide, as mentioned before, base content. So content for free, that again, to a large degree, is neutral and not pushing a certain technology, but that they can integrate in order to actually make their audiences aware of what's coming and how they can enable it. So that's why we're working with Sphere and other partners in the area, because they have the network. They know their audiences way better than we do. So very often we provide the content, they integrate it in the right place based on their judgment, based on what they actually choose out of it. So it's not us pushing something, but we provide options, and they can actually then reuse the best use of the beneficiaries.
Thank you. So any question, Tristan, online? No? Here?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the panel. My name is Jonas Schäfer. I'm a learning and development advisor at RedR, small Swiss humanitarian organization. I have a question. How transparent do we need to be with the affected populations about that we are using this tool? Any thoughts on that?
Andrew, do you want to answer? Or James?
Sorry, it was a question, how when it comes to the use.
Shall I jump in first? This is James online. I'll jump in first,
Sure.
and perhaps Andrew can come after me. Yeah, that's a really great question. I would go a step before transparency, which is that ideally things should be co-designed with the affected populations as much as possible. I think that's where the solutions would meet the needs as closely as possible. So people have mentioned a few times about the work the Nesta are doing on community intelligence. I think that's a great example of actually a framework for doing that kind of design work previous to that. And then in terms of transparency, yes, my team specialize in learning design, and one thing we always are very clear about is when imagery is AI generated, because we want to make sure people are very aware of it, not using photorealistic AI, and also when content has in some way been summarized by AI, we do have a little flag we add to learning design to make that clear, and anything would always be checked, co-designed, as has been mentioned, by a local expert as well. But even before transparency, my main takeaway would be that we want to be co-designing things with the local population, and also help empowering them to then use the tools themselves, rather than us giving them the outputs of something that's been generated by someone else.
Maybe if I can come in real quickly. So I would also want to link transparency to issues of AI governance. And here I'm looking at data protection, data privacy, and also safeguarding issues that may come about when it comes to using AI platforms, and especially with communities. So I'd say, yes, like James has mentioned, it all starts with core design, whereby the communities are raising what is priority for them, what is important, and also they're clear about the process of using AI in their context. So I'd say we have to be absolutely transparent. There are no two ways about that, because at the end of it all, it's interaction between the communities, and using AI as more of a way of complementing any interventions that is going to them. So transparency is definitely key when it comes to the use of AI with communities.
Thank you, Andrew. So we don't have more questions for now. We are to come to Victoria, right, to the workshop now. Can I close the session? So thank you, everyone online and the participants in the room for this question. I think it's a good discussion. So thank you, everyone. So to you, Tristan.